Thank you so much, Priscilla and Talene. I'm just going to share my slides. Does everybody see them? We're good?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I am based here in Edmonton, Alberta. I have a photo here. I did want to start by just acknowledging that I am based on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional meeting place of many Indigenous groups. And I do hope that this presentation will help us think about our responsibility to the land and the communities in which we serve and where we live, and how we can, through our work, give back to the communities that we live among. So for this presentation, this is our inaugural launch party. I hope you brought some snacks. I'm happy to be the first one to go. And as Priscilla mentioned, my article is here that was published last March. I conducted this research over my sabbatical, which was 2022 to 2023. If you want to go and access it, it is there. It is linked in the chat as well. So I'm really happy just to have an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about it. And I do have a whole bunch of discussion questions that I hope you'll contribute to as well once we get through the kind of formal presentation part of this. But over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk about why I did the research that I did. I'll talk about the methodology I used, a little bit about my findings, the suggestions that I got out of this research. And I'm going to close by talking about the Community Scholars Program. So I'll explain what that is. And I have an exciting announcement to give alongside that. So stick around for that. And then, yeah, we'll do discussion after that point in time. And I'll also be happy to take any questions. So first off, for anybody who's not familiar, I just wanted to give you a very simple definition of community-based research, which was really at the heart of the research that I did. So a really simple definition of that is just research that is conducted with and for, not on, members of a community. And it's becoming much more common across Canada for people to participate in this type of research, where a university researcher, for instance, will work with a community organization or even a community member and work with them from the point of figuring out what the research question will be to serve whatever their needs are, right through to data collection and dissemination of that research. So it's really meant to have some practical impact within the community. It can take a long time, but definitely a benefit to our communities, becoming much more common, probably happening at your institutions as well. The goal is to inform public policy often, or advance some sort of social change. Often it can also be to help the community organizations secure funding and overall just support the community members' goals. So the stuff that comes out of this research is sometimes peer-reviewed research articles, but not always. Oftentimes it's reports that are done alongside the community that are shared back to the community or shared online. Also videos, things like digital stories are disseminated out as a form of research dissemination, responding to a research question. Photo voice projects are very common. So that is where all the research participants will take images, write a narrative alongside that to respond to a research question or problem. And that gets shared out in different ways. PowerPoint presentations, podcasts, zines, the full range of things that you could share out coming out of a research project. These are usually shared on websites and social media and at meetings and events, or just directly back to community members. They're not ending up in research repositories and institutional repositories usually. So for me and for my purposes, as I mentioned, I'm based in Edmonton. I'm at MacEwan University right now, where that blue dot is on my slide. We are surrounded by not-for-profits and charitable organizations, and many of those have formal partnerships with our university, and they are working with our researchers to create those community-based research products that I just mentioned. I was really curious to find out what role the library could play in supporting this work. And for this part of my research that I'm going to be talking about, I was really interested in exploring how our institutional repository could play a role in perhaps archiving and disseminating this work. So that was kind of where I was going with my sabbatical research. And I can promise you this research is happening across the country. It is a big focus. You'll see that commitment to community written through institutional missions and vision statements and that sort of thing. So I felt like it was a good area to dig into for that year that I had. So in terms of the methodology that I used for my research, I looked up community-based researchers working at publicly funded universities across the country. It was all English language, unfortunately, because I don't speak French very well, but I was trying to capture as many researchers working in this area as possible. in Canada. I ended up interviewing a total of 17 faculty members who do this type of research with community. I also sent out requests to interview administrators who work in community engagement centers and institutes, or who have a specific focus on community-based research within university research offices. I ended up speaking to 6 administrators working in that area. So with the researchers and the administrators, I was asking them about their perspectives and experiences with disseminating research, knowledge mobilization in this area, and also their thoughts on library services that were relevant to this type of work. And then I took a multi-method approach. So I also sent a survey out to scholarly communications librarians across the country, asking them for their insights and experiences on working with community-based researchers at their institution and archiving this type of work in their repositories. My response rate wasn't that high. I think I had a 23% response rate. 16 people got back to me. Thank you if you did. I very much appreciate it. But again, asking them those sorts of things around their priorities and practices. Elephant in the room, I did not interview or involve any community partners in this research. I didn't have time. I had 12 months. It would have been very hard to figure out how to recruit and incentivize that kind of participation in this research, but it was exploratory and it was just a starting place in this area. So I hope that will inform future research moving forward. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my findings, first from researchers and the administrators that I talked to, and they identified both challenges and opportunities to putting the types of work that comes out of their work into an institutional repository. So I'll start with the challenges and why these community-based researchers are not using our repository services. So one of the main themes that came out of my work was that they don't trust putting their work on university servers. I talked to a few people who had experiences putting up their research projects through the university website and through services available through the university, not the library necessarily, but the university, and they would just disappear overnight without warning. We've probably all encountered experiences like that at our universities. So they would rather have full control over where they're sharing their stuff in partnership with their community and where they want it shared. Several people also mentioned how sharing things publicly out in the world has been used against more vulnerable, more marginalized populations, especially with Indigenous research. We see that a lot. So there was the very fair argument that not everything should be digitized, not everything should be shared out, and the community really needs to have full control over what's done with their data, with their contributions. So fair enough, and we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about all of this. The other thing that came up with pretty much every single person I talked to was just a total lack of awareness around our repository services and whether those could be used for more non-traditional research outputs. So the people who were familiar with institutional repositories were talking about how they were fully aware that they can put their research articles in there and make things open access that way, and that they could put, student theses, dissertations. But in terms of any other type of research project, they were not aware that they could deposit those. And maybe at your institution, they can't. At mine, we very much welcome a full range of different types of research outputs though, but it just wasn't on their radar whatsoever. So good thing to know that that exists out there. Nobody mentioned data repositories either, which I found really interesting because I was asking them about what library services they were aware of. So that could be an area for future research as well, to see if data repositories play any role in all of this. The other thing that came up with several people I talked to was that they were under the impression that institutional repositories make research products available only to the people at their institutions. They did not know that we were sharing things out through open access channels, that things would be available through Google Scholar, wherever. So that's a good reminder to all of us when we're promoting our services to make it clear that it's not just that you need an institutional login to access all the stuff that we're trying to share out into the world. And also, they were talking about how they were just unsure about what the whole purpose of repositories were. They were like, I can't see myself using this. I don't know how my community partners would use this. This doesn't seem relevant to me. To that end, too, those who had explored their repositories said that they seemed too complicated. The interfaces were too complicated. The submission process was too complicated. They were confused by how copyright and licensing plays into depositing things. It was much easier for them to just put things into Google Drive and share them out that way, or put them onto a Google site, share them out that way. And flowing from this was also just that it's not a huge priority to have to deal with figuring out how to deposit into institutional repositories. And they weren't as concerned with long-term digital preservation as they were with just the immediate impact that sharing this work could have through whatever means were most available to them. But they did talk about how digital preservation could be really important in theory, so just not at the top of their priority list. Several of the people I talked to did think it was a good idea. It's just not something they'd considered before, though. So I'll talk about the opportunities that they shared with me that could come from repository sharing. One that came up was that putting things in a repository, making them available online, could help avoid duplication. Often you'll have a community organization that's getting approached from multiple researchers, research teams, and institutions. And it's a bit of a misuse of resource when that research project is already underway. So the more we can share out that these research projects are happening through whichever means we have available to us, the better. So maybe posting reports and stuff coming out of these research projects online would help with that, at least to an extent. Also, they talked about how sharing what they're doing right now can inform future practice and help them learn from other people's mistakes by getting all of these different types of research products out there and on the public record. Also, just in a practical sense, a few researchers talked to me about how they often reference research products, research reports, different sorts of projects that they've linked to, and then overnight they've just disappeared and they can't find them anymore anywhere. So having those permanent links that repositories can provide would be a benefit. On that note, too, permalinks for citation, people spoke about how important that can be and how adding these works with a permanent link and citation information adds often marginalized or local voices to the scholarly conversation that are often left out and not on permanent record. And it acknowledges those contributions from community partners in that way. Usage metrics were also talked about a little bit. In theory, usage metrics, how many times people are viewing and downloading a work, could help a community organization with maintaining funding, showing their impact, and then for the researchers to show and demonstrate their impact in tenure and promotion, because a lot of these researchers talked about how they have a really hard time communicating the importance of this community-based research versus kind of more traditional research that their colleagues might be doing. So on the librarian side, from my survey results, there's basically two sides to this. On one side, several people commented on how, and I really like this quote, somebody said, "It's always risky to start doing more different work as it usually requires giving something else up." I just heard about how a lot of people are busy enough trying to do what they're doing, trying to get articles and theses, dissertations, and this would open up a new area that they just do not have time for, and I totally get it. So totally fair point. But I also loved this quote that I got from somebody who said, "Providing support to these kinds of projects will help ensure that the outputs are available over time to both community members and to researchers building on this work in the future. I don't think that we should treat them as separate or other when compared to traditional research." And I will say 81% of folks who did fill out my survey did say that they were interested in exploring this area further and putting more of a focus on gathering community-based research outputs. So, all fair points. Last thing I'll say in regards to my research were just some of the suggestions that I got from the researchers and administrators that I talked to, because I was like, how do we promote our stuff to you? How do we make sure you're at least aware of this option if it makes sense to you? So I'll share what they told me. The first one and the thing that came up the most was just doing really proactive face-to-face outreach. People do not read our newsletters. They don't show up for our optional workshops. They don't look at our social media. They really want those personal relationships. Everyone said, come to department meetings and talk to us directly at our department meetings. That is the #1 way that you can promote your services. A few people also mentioned how great it would be to have a librarian on their research teams. I know that's not practical for everybody, but they did say that would be great if we had someone to help just work with us through the entire process. A few people also mentioned how it would be helpful if we started a community of practice on community-based research because there is so much interest across their campuses on this topic, or if librarians were to join existing communities of practice. And on that note, I'll just mention there's an organization called Community-Based Research Canada that many of our institutions across Canada are members of, and they do hold regular meetings. I participated in several of them. while I was on sabbatical, and they talk about different professional development topics, and there weren't very many librarians involved in that community, but that's an opportunity open to many of us right now that we could join. They also talked about how they do have existing relationships with their subject liaison librarians. So trying to encourage our liaison colleagues to just promote these services in their direction as well can be helpful. But again, recognizing everybody's very busy. The other thing that came out was just to promote discovery, make sure people are aware this stuff actually will be discoverable online. And I think it's also really promising that Scholaris, the Canada-wide repository, is looking at a discovery service where you could search across multiple repositories at once, because that came up a few times. So people would just like one spot to go searching and not have stuff scattered all over the place, trying to find it. And then user friendliness came up a lot. So making sure that our interfaces are user friendly, our deposit processes are as easy on people and as straightforward as possible. All of our policies and guidelines associated with our repository are also user friendly. That sort of thing came up quite a bit. So my overall takeaways from all of this research was just that trying to expand our repository services to involve community-based research outputs will take time. I'll admit it's been 2 years since I got back from sabbatical, and I'm just starting to go down the road of the kind of suggestions that I've given you. So you kind of have to make space for it and make sure it's an institutional priority and all of that kind of stuff too. But I do think it's a really great opportunity for us to start archiving and sharing out a lot of this research that's not being saved anywhere else. There's a huge body of various types of research right now that are just disappearing every day because they're not thinking about this kind of long-term preservation and access. I would also say that the administrators I spoke to really want to collaborate with us. So if you do have a community engagement center on your campus, go talk to them. Because I mean, their job is to build bridges and create opportunities. And so they were all really keenly interested in how they could work with libraries and work with our repositories. And overall, I'm definitely not suggesting that we open our institutional repositories up to the entire community. I think that would be unmanageable, but all of our universities and our researchers at our universities do have existing partnerships. So I'm really just suggesting that we explore those existing partnerships and see if there's some opportunities to collaborate where those exist. On that note, I will say my big announcement that I said I would conclude with as part of the formal part of this presentation. If you're not familiar with the Community Scholars Program, it was started in British Columbia and out of Simon Fraser and has several partners across BC, where there is a research portal giving access to nonprofit organizations and charitable organizations access to research articles. And they have a certain number of people that they can give access to this research portal. So they'll partner with different organizations in their area. They have access to articles, policy commons, also that database is available, and dedicated research help from librarians. So it started with a few universities across BC, and it recently expanded to Ontario, based out of McMaster University. So they're taking on different community organizations to work with them, but then they're also working with other Ontario universities to also join this program and give access to these community partners to research articles, research resources, and research help. So MacEwan is going to become the regional hub for Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories starting early in 2026. So it's expanding across the country. So if your institution is interested and you're in any of these areas, please go to this website and there's contact information there to express your interest, or you can reach out to me too if you're in the area of Prairies and Northwest Territories, at least. I'm talking about this because I think that as our institutions join the Community Scholars Program, it shows some investment from our leadership in wanting to put more time and energy into this area. And I think that can create that groundwork for expanding out our services beyond just research help and reference consults to looking at how we can support our community partners in other ways, like repositories and other sorts of things. So I really think this will be the jumping off point for me, at least, to start really thinking about how to expand our own repository here. And I hope it will inspire you to do the same. But if you're not in one of these provinces or you don't join this program, you can still reach out to community partners working with your university, talk to your research offices. They'll know kind of where those opportunities exist. And maybe we can start collecting some of this stuff. So That's all I had to say. I do have discussion questions. Before we turn off the recording, I just wanted to share them here so they're on record. I am going to also put them in the chat so everybody has them. And I hope you'll participate. Let's see if I can find the chat. Okay, so those are there. So we really just wanted to talk to the community who's here today about your experiences, your perspectives, what kind of barriers you see with working in this area. And with that, I think we can stop the recording.